Hello and welcome to the 29th episode of the Powerless Podcast. And holy shit, my hair looks absolutely ridiculous. I definitely need to get a haircut. I usually wear a hat when I do these things. I should have grabbed one when I came down to my basement to record this, but whatever. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to record this and put it up, and people can see my fucking disgusting, overly long, curly mop on my head that I need to have shaved off pronto. But regardless, I'll stop talking about that shit. For this episode, I talked to Dan Hodsdon, the guitarist from the band the Callous Daoboys. Recently put out the song Waco Jesus for their upcoming EP, God Smiles Upon the Callous Daoboys. We talk a lot about that EP, the writing process of it for a bit. While Dan is not the primary lyricist of the band, they still talk about some of the inspiration for it, talk about the songwriting process, talk about how they got into the band just a little over a year ago, how they actually wrote some of these songs with the band prior to them actually being in the band, the live performances, what they've noticed being in this band as it pertains to the scene when it comes to heavy music, alternative music. We dive a little bit into Dan's inspiration when it comes to heavy music, how nu metal really influenced them, their upbringing, and how that kind of brought them into quickly being involved in playing guitar and instrumentation and songwriting and all those things. And just a host of other things. We get into a little bit of the details of the other two songs, Pushing the Pink Envelope and Designer Shroud of Turin, featuring Pulses, which is a return guest on here a couple of times and will be on here relatively soon again for their yet to be announced release that we'll be talking about. So make sure to check out that when we cover that and when that goes out. I also side note wrote an article for the Nu Metal Agenda recently about Pulse's Adventure with Sales Ahead, Guardrail, and Lucky Girl Syndrome, about their show in Chicago for their weekender, the Woodland Creatures 3 Royal. So make sure to check that out. The show was absolutely fantastic. It was great to finally meet those people in person, some of whom I had talked with online for quite a while. Had one of the bands on twice. Like I said, Pulses with Sales Ahead has been on here. Guardrail's been on here. So it was great to see them in person. Wearing the Guardrail shirt today. So that was absolutely fantastic. Definitely check that out at the Nu Metal Agenda website. But it was great to talk to Dan about all these different things. We dove into that. We dove into what Dan's noticed in the scene, socially, politically, bands that influenced them politically, all these different things. It was really an interesting chat. It was cool to kind of pick somebody's brain from a band that I've, over the last year, really started to respect from their back catalog, the last album that they put out, Celebrity Therapist, and of course this new song, Waco Jesus, which might be my favorite song they put out so far. So we talk about all that and more. It was just a really great conversation, and I really hope you all enjoy it. Make sure to check out the newest song from the Callous Daoboys. If you're under a rock and you haven't heard it yet, it is fucking amazing. So definitely check that out. And before we get into the episode, just remember to follow on all streaming platforms, whatever you use for podcasts. Also on YouTube. Less people watch on YouTube for some reason than on podcast platforms. I guess my face is just not that appealing. I'm saying that as I come in here, my hair looks like a fucking wreck after work, but whatever. Make sure to follow on all those things. Follow on social media. It's all the Powerless Pod. And email me at thepowerlesspod@gmail.com if you hear this and you're a musician, or I also talk to journalists, anybody that's really interested in talking about the intersectionality of politics, social issues, and music. So please hit me up there. Please hit me up on socials. Got a lot of really cool guests coming up. The last episode I had with Andrew Herman from Johnny Booth really connected me with a few different people, which was really cool, as well as just getting connected with Andrew, which was awesome. The episode is one of my favorites that I've been able to do. So check that out. Check out the back catalog of this whole show. If this is your first time listening, follow on the socials, email me. I've said this too many times already in this intro. And before we get into the episode with Dan, I have not done this before. I'm not going to play a song or anything. But if you're into politics, if you're into heavy music, If you're into stuff that talks about social issues from kind of like a pretty critical lens, socialist lens, communist lens, whatever you want to call it. I am doing a recording project with Simon Winter, who's the editor of the Downbeat podcast, also makes his own music under Dead Soul, with a metalcore breakdown, angry as fuck, whatever you want to call it, music project called Dead Inside. We have a couple of kind of 2-song releases we've called Season 1 and Season 2 you can check out, but we have an EP coming out pretty soon that I just finished the vocals for. I think it is a huge step up for us, so definitely check that out. I'm not just trying to plug that. I just think it would be cool if people are interested into the intersectionality of politics and music, if you want to check that out. So go check that out. Dead Inside on all music streaming platforms. Check us out, Dead Inside Band on Twitter. I think it's Dead Inside Are Cool on Instagram. But check that out as well. We're going to be doing some cool things over there. I might try to kind of incorporate some stuff there into this podcast, since the intersectionality thing is pretty connected to the podcast in a lot of ways. So definitely check that out. I'm going to stop rambling here. You're going to hear the intro music, and then we're going to get into the episode with Dan from the Callous Daoboys. Thanks so much. Here with Dan from the Callous Daoboys for the Powerless podcast. I think I just asked you this right before I hit record, but how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I'm finally getting over. I came home and I was just immediately struck with a terrible illness, and I'm finally on the other side of that, and I can breathe. Feels great.
Well, I'm glad you're at least feeling better. That's a bonus. I'm glad you're able to come on so quickly after I messaged you the other day. We were kind of talking a few weeks back, but this actually really worked out because you recently put out a new single, announced the new EP. Newest song, Waco Jesus, is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
I had listened to it when it first came out, but I watched the music video when I was exercising this morning, and I was just like, God, this is so fun. Like the whole like ghost hunter type beat or whatever that's
we were trying to rip off what is it called? Is it just called Ghost Hunters or something?
Yeah, there's all those shows in like the mid 2000s and on that were just like the weirdest thing ever that was so popular.
Yeah, we were just like, what if this was the music video? Like, it doesn't need to be anything like crazy elaborate. No metalcore band playing in a warehouse type vibe. Let's just do something fun.
Yeah, it fits the, even though, I was looking through the lyrics, obviously the song itself, lyrical content is not just like, it's not goofy, but I always love when a band that has, heavy, chaotic music can, not take yourself too seriously in a music video and just have fun for a change, as opposed to, like you said, rain
metalcore
falling all over
in
you.
The abandoned building or the warehouse, the white room.
Yeah, right. It's always good to kind of change it up and show people that like metal music and heavy music can be funny and fun and goofy.
Exactly.
Right?
And that carries over to like everything we do. Like we're never like trying to be like tough guys or anything like that. It's just us, and we're funny and we like to have fun. So why not have that in every aspect of our music?
Right. And just because the music itself, it's one of those things. I talked to a while back on this podcast. I talked to Benny from Avoid, who's like the encapsulation of that too, where like they'll have a serious song, they'll have this like heavy, energetic, raw song, but then like goofy as hell on stage, dressing hilarious, doing so, you know what I mean? It's like it's okay to be goofy and in heavy music, so I absolutely love it.
Yeah, those guys are so fun live too. I saw them when they were opening for Fit for a King, and it was like one of the best opening acts you could have possibly had on that bill. I was so amped to see them, and they delivered. Yeah, they're
definitely one of those bands that like people have to keep an eye on for the future. But we're not here to talk about it. We're not here to talk about Avoid. We're here to talk about Callous Daoboys, and obviously the newest EP, God Smiles Upon the Callous Daoboys, was just announced along with a single. I'm just referencing this because they're featured on the EP. I got to see Pulses and hang out with them on Saturday in Chicago.
Yeah.
And we were talking a little bit about the EP. And Matt, at least who I was talking to the most, he was like, yeah, all 4 of us in some fashion are actually
Yep.
on the song, which is really
All
cool.
4 of them are on it. It's so cool.
And that, you know, Waco Jesus is a great song, but he said you just got to be ready for the other 2 because they kick it to 11 on like the crazy and chaotic.
It's funny. Everyone's been thankfully everyone's been very receptive of it. Like it's probably the most like stripped back and like kind of normal structured song we've put or the band has ever put out. It's the first release that I'm actually on along with our drummer. So I'm just excited that the reception has been the way it is. But the other 2 that are also on the EP, I think the track listing is out. So pushing the pink envelope,
pushing the pink envelope and designer's shroud of Turin, right?
Yep. So those 2 are they have like they don't have like the same structure, but they have like a lot of what everyone can usually expect from a Daoboys song, but with very very juicy choruses. Probably the best choruses Carson has ever written. Period. So I'm really excited for people to hear those because it's all the crazy shit that you can normally expect from us, but it's more accessible, but it's also whatever we wanted to do at the time. It's a lot
absolutely. Which, you know, I know, like you said, this is, you know, you're a relatively newer member of the band, but like it's still absolutely like the newest song. It absolutely still sounds like Daoboys. But like you said, like pretty, I don't know, it sounds like refined in a way, you know. So I'm happy to hear this new, this kind of new trajectory for the band. I know in an interview, one of you talked about that it kind of feels like the band, it's like a new chapter for the band in a lot of ways. Obviously, there's the new members and everything in between, but it still sounds like the band, which is absolutely fantastic.
Oh yeah, I would say we try to avoid like at least from what we were telling our PR team, like we're trying to avoid like this is the revival of the Daoboys. This is just the natural evolution of the sound that we're going for, and like making it sound however we want it to sound. Like if a song calls for a Latin break and a salsa break in the middle of it, then it calls for that. Or if it calls for it to just be this, I don't want to call the song straightforward, but like Waco Jesus is a very like verse, chorus, verse, bridge, you know, so on and so forth kind of tune.
Right.
And we said like, hey, we need to be on Octane Radio. So here's Waco Jesus, but it's also, it's indistinguishable as a Daoboys. It's I'm forgetting the term for it, but you cannot. It's unmistakably a Daoboys song. You know what I mean?
Right. There's still everything about it, from the chaotic energy that, like, I don't know, it's something I've loved about the band. And like I said, this new song, and I would assume the rest of the EP feels this way, where the band's always been, you know, there's bands out there that are very like mathcore-y, crazy, all over the place, to the point that like you don't know what the fuck is going on. And there's obviously bands that are a lot more, you know, that are straightforward and just do more classic song structure and all that. But what I've loved about Daoboys in every release that they've, you know, you guys have all done, is that it's kind of like the best of both worlds of those things, that you can go nuts, go weird with it, do whatever the fuck you want, and yet there's still like this catchiness to it in kind of a unique,
there's like a cohesion way, you know?
There's
something to connect to with it.
Yeah, cohesion was a better word. Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, I came into the band as a fan, so like I totally understand like that's what drew me to the Daoboys in the first place, because like you got all the other like crazy mathcore bands that are like mathy sometimes for the sake of just being mathy and crazy, but there's something very like tangible with what Daoboys was doing even before I joined the band and was writing with the band. There's just something that it's very easy to grab onto, and that's why so many people are like, I would sometimes say, just like obsessed with it. There's just something about it. It's very honest, it's very personable, and it's easy to latch onto.
Absolutely, 100%. Well, thanks for going over that. And again, I've probably said this way too many times for people to hear it already in the few minutes we've been talking, but newest single, absolutely fantastic. EP, I'm super excited for. What I'd like to talk to you a little bit about, in case you're unfamiliar with the kind of structure of this podcast, is a lot of times I bring people on, talk to them about newest releases, but also I really like to dive into the inspirations for you both musically. And I also have journalists and things of that nature on this podcast at times, and just, it's okay if it doesn't, but if music or whatever else has really influenced your beliefs or anything you have in that regard, socially, politically, any of those things. So I guess to start off, since you're one of the newest members of the band, might be good for people that aren't overly familiar with you compared to some of the members that have been on for a longer time. What started for you getting into music in general as a kid or whatever else? And where did that trajectory go for you to getting into heavy music?
I mean, my dad's also a musician. My dad's the reason I play guitar in the first place. I was very fortunate to have a guitarist as a dad, than wanting to be a guitarist, because there's always just a nice guitar laying around that I could play with. And also he just introduced me and my brother to music at very, very young ages. I mentioned this on a podcast about like a year ago or so, but he would put on like old Joe Satriani records, and my brother and I would call it the Power Ranger music, and we would like fight to Joe Satriani music, like Surfing with the Alien and stuff like that. Also he introduced me to like my first, like, I think my dad actually introduced me to my first new metal band, this band Cinder from Florida.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure they're from Florida, but there was the song on that song from one of them. There was one of their songs that was really cool that we would listen to all the time, and my parents would turn it down the one time he says fuck on it. But yeah, my dad like introduced me to heavy and rock music like very, very young, and it just stuck with me. And then when I hit like middle school and started like listening to music on my own, I had a Zune. If anyone remembers what a fucking Zune is.
Yeah, I had one of those too. I had like the maroon one that could hold. It was so cool. It could hold like
it was
10,000 songs or whatever crazy thing it was.
Awesome. And I had one of those, and I was listening to Metallica all the time, and I just slowly started to find more stuff that was like at the time like that fit with like where my head was at, like not like a popular kid in school or anything, like kind of a I guess you could say kind of a loser or whatever, just like one of the kids that wasn't like in the in crowd or whatever. And stuff like Korn and Limp Bizkit and Slipknot weren't just like Metallica's lyrics are, I wouldn't say esoteric, but they're not. James Hetfield didn't have the same problems I had, as far as I'm aware. He at least wasn't singing about them. And so artists like Korn and like with Jonathan Davis and Corey Taylor, like there was something for me to like grab onto and to relate to. And that kind of just, it led into more and more of more like extreme music as I got older and like was more familiar with how to use the internet. And I started finding bands like Dillinger. That was like the first like mathcore band I probably ever got into. But it was I wouldn't say a relatively straightforward way of like getting into extreme music, but it just that was the stuff that made my brain tick the right way, and it just made sense for me to want to listen to stuff like that. Like extreme music that wasn't just about this thing is bad. It's like, hey, I kind of don't feel awesome. Here's a ridiculously heavy song about it, or I hate everyone, and here's a ridiculously heavy song about it. That was kind of my intro to a lot of like more extreme music.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, Korn. I mean, it's interesting for people from our generation that got into heavy music. I think, obviously, like you said, you hear the more traditional metal bands like Metallica, or you get into, as a guitarist, I can relate with the Joe Satriani thing. Actually, the amp I use is still a Joe Satriani signature.
That's awesome.
PV one. Yeah. I still use that whenever I very rarely play live anywhere. But there was something about nu metal growing up, especially like the bigger bands like Korn, Slipknot, all that you just felt the angst and you felt like those people were coming from that place of like other people that just absolutely did not feel like they fit in anywhere. You didn't have to be like you didn't even have to just be like a quote unquote loser, but it was just like metal music talking about anxiety or talking about like really Korn talking about trauma or whatever else. Like, that it was like, it was just something that had never, it was like in our time, it was like the closest version to like a new genre being made, which was just so fantastic to relate to. And I think it just like scratched an itch on our brains that like still to this day, I go back to those bands more than anything else a lot of times.
I still listen to Korn and Slipknot. Like I still listen to that old shit.
It could still inspire. It's still like inspiring, and you kind of relate to things in different ways as you get to different stages of life and all that kind of stuff. So it totally makes sense. I guess this is kind of going all over the place, but when it comes to especially, I guess we'd be talking about these 3 songs, or if you've worked on other material with the Callous Daoboys in relation to influences and things like that as well. what's kind of the songwriting process for you guys? Like, put me in the space a bit of like what it takes, because I know there's 6 people in the band, a lot of instruments going on, a lot of, you know, vocals going on from a few different people at different points or whatever else.
Oh yeah.
Definitely not, I would assume, not maybe the most conventional way compared to some other bands, maybe so, but kind of walk me through what the songwriting process is for you guys. Is it, you know, one person sitting in front of Reaper or Pro Tools or something and coming together?
It's usually that.
Yeah.
A lot of the times it is that. Carson's always trying to write, even when he's like, you know, not in front of a computer, or for like if he's at work or something like that. He's, you know, he's one of those people that just is always trying to create something. But from the writing experience, at least for this EP anyway, I've helped with stuff that's going to be on like the next record and whatnot.
Right.
But at least for this EP, since it's very current, I remember the song "Designer Shroud of Turin" is the first song I ever wrote with Carson, and that was even before I was in the band. I just was at his apartment, and he's like, we're just messing around. He's like, hey, what if we wrote a new metal song like right now? I'm like, okay, what if we did? And he's like, what if it was in drop B? I'm like, what if it was, dude? And then eventually Designer Shroud of Turin just started taking form, and it got wrapped up only a couple months ago. But sometimes at least from like the Celebrity Therapist era, I think the writing process was a lot of Carson having ideas and then maybe pitching it to like another musician friend or someone involved in music that Carson respects or looks up to, or is one of his peers. And then they would kind of bounce back and forth ideas on it. And I think that still kind of happens. It just kind of depends what the song might call for. Like, for instance, we may or may not be working on a song with our friends in Bajalvin. They're a little cybergrind act from, I guess, Boston and Minneapolis.
Okay.
Somehow. But so there was just, we had like a little part, and we're like, I don't know what to do with this anymore. Like, I have no more ideas for this. And we're just like, hey, do you guys have an idea for this? And we send it to them, and then they send us back something like a week later. I'm like, okay, cool. Now we have more ideas of where to go with this. So sometimes the writing process it can be very all over the place and can be outsourced to people that aren't even involved like directly with the band. And sometimes Carson's like, this is the song. Here it is. Like, I think Pushing the Pink Envelope was kind of like that. There's one section in that where, again, I was at Carson's apartment before I was even in the band. He's like, hey, I want to steal this chord progression. Can you help me figure out what it is? And so we listened to this song like 10 times through, and then I finally picked out what the chords were, and then we kind of moved them all around and like made it into a different progression. But otherwise that song was like done, and there's just like, we needed this like little part right here, and what can we do with it? Otherwise it's like, can be pretty straightforward. I mean, really the only odd part of our band is, I guess, having the violin player, but even then that's not like the most crazy thing. I always love that when people are like, how does anything even happen in that band? There's like 10 members. I'm like, it's actually pretty simple. There's only so many of us now. Sometimes we'll have a saxophone player on stage, but the core group is, you know, the 6, but it's a standard lineup of people. And the violinist and I play piano, so we take turns playing whatever piano parts are called for. And sometimes if people just have an idea, we'll bring it to the group and be like, I don't know what to do with this. Can we do something with this? And Carson, in his infinite wisdom, will have some idea of either where it can go or how to expand on it. So it's there's lots of different ways that songs get completed and started with Daoboys.
Which makes a lot of sense when you have people that are you know, talented at their craft and have opinions and have influences and whatever else, right? It sounds a little bit like Carson can steer the ship at sometimes, but I'm sure that's not even always the case, right? Or whatever else. That makes a lot of sense. It's good to hear that's a lot of collaboration. It's very interesting that you mentioned 2 different songs from this EP that you helped with writing in some ways before you were actually even in the band.
Oh no, it's really cool. It's very cool. I'm very, very proud of how some of these songs came together. And I remember when we wrote like that little melody line in Waco Jesus, and now it's real. It's the coolest feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. That's gotta be awesome. Also, that these songs are finally for you. I mean, is it finally out and you've
They're
got
finally
songs
like
to
they're real. Like they're like
yeah,
they've been sitting in a Dropbox for however long now, but now they're like now they're out there. Or at least one of them's out there. It's happening now. So like
right.
I've been in the band for over a year now, and like I get props all the time for being like you guitarist of Daoboys, good job, you're doing it, man. I'm like thanks, but it for a while it has felt like I'm playing other people's music
Right.
because I kind of was for a bit, but I got so ingrained in like the general culture and like the I don't want to say the fandom because that's not the right term, but like just the general world of the Daoboys that it started feeling less and less like I was playing other people's music and I was actually putting something of myself forward, even playing songs that I had no part in writing. So
Right.
it's cool to finally be on the other side of that, and then there's new material coming out that I can be like, that's me,
Yeah.
that's me. It's a very cool feeling.
Absolutely. 100%. That's awesome. So again, I'm jumping around here, so I apologize. But thanks for going over that. I just think a lot of people, a lot of people would be very interested in any band when they kind of talk about their songwriting process. Because I ask
Yeah,
people these
yeah,
questions, and yet, like, everybody kind of has a different answer, right? So it's
yeah.
thanks for
No,
going over that.
totally.
Um, so kind of going back a little bit, like I said, I'm jumping all over the place here, but
No, fine.
so you kind of get into heavier music through Korn, Slipknot, like you said, to varying degrees, Metallica. Dad's a guitarist, gets you kind of playing in that vein a bit. When did you start kind of writing your own music? Did that happen early on for you? What did you play in other bands prior to Daoboys? I'd maybe assume, maybe not.
Yeah.
But what was the trajectory there?
I mean, when I first like started learning what a distorted channel was, my dad also gave me a seven like an 8-track recorder or something like that that saved to not even floppy disks. They were like something completely different. They were like floppy disks, but they were like hard. Like they
Yeah,
were like solid. I forget what they're called, but my dad gave me one of those, and I was naming songs after the shape of the guitar pick I was using, and it was just nonsense half the time. So I was like just always like trying to put. I was I've been writing since like I picked up the instrument, but I don't think I started like actually putting anything together until like maybe late middle school when I started playing bass, and then I found like another guitarist and a drummer, and we would record on like a little tape recorder, us jamming, and like one of us would have like an idea, and we would just follow that for like way too long. But
yeah,
I wouldn't even say actual songs were getting put together back then. It was just like actually like finding like structure in music with other people that wasn't just playing a cover or playing a someone else's music. It was just like, what are we gonna do with this? And then when I got to music college, when I moved to Georgia, day after I graduated high school, I just fucked off to Georgia, from Florida originally. But it was right around that time that I was like, I was living with another musician I was going to college with, um, and he and I just started writing music. And the first song I ever wrote, we called it Coffee Break, and it's like 13 minutes long. It is way too long, but it has like a lot of like little parts on there that like pushed me a little further of like what I was able to do musically at the time. And then he and I started some bands, and we were in jam bands together and like psych rock stuff, like stuff that was like fun to play in because you could essentially play whatever you wanted.
hmm
But the like the lead guy of that never wanted, like, we were like, okay, well, we could be like a really good prog rock band if you would just let us be a prog rock band. And he's like, no, I want to be a jam band like Fish and the Grateful Dead. I'm like, that sucks, I don't want to do
I
that.
don't want to do that shit. Yeah,
And we tried our best. We put out like one EP with that, and those songs are really good, and they're straightforward and just like good old rock songs. And that was like right before the turn of 2020, excuse me. And I've been in other random bands around here, everything from like indie bands to emo bands, and so many cover bands and wedding bands. Uh, but it was only like so much that like people would care about it because it was just kind of like run of the mill, whatever.
right.
Um, I had some like good shows here and there with that, and but I never felt like much of that stuff was like actually like putting myself forward with it. And I remember around the time Dillinger was starting to break up, Daoboys put out Great Rocket Robbery, and And I heard that, I'm like, oh, this is the band that I need to be in right now. I didn't know you could just make your own music like this. Like me at like 20 something years old being like, I didn't know you could write that. You can actually write music like that. I thought that was just reserved for other people. And then I found out they were local too. And I decided like I need to either become best friends with these people or I need to invade their band somehow and be the second bass player. And eventually the stars aligned and I became best friends with everyone in the band. And then eventually like, hey, we're having a changing of the guard. Do you want to play guitar for us? I'm like, yes, more than anything in the world. I was already living with half of them. I'm like, oh yes,
Oh yeah.
duh. Like, who else would you want in your band but me? Give me 1 second.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, that's better. Yeah, I was like, duh, dude. Like, of course I want to be in this stupid little band, and now I am.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. Just curious, what music college did you go to?
I went to the Atlanta Institute of Music and Media college. It was
I
a year
gotcha.
program.
Yeah, but that's awesome. All right, and yeah, I appreciate you going over that. And that's a hell of a way to get into a band. Just like I'm gonna seed myself in and live with these people. And then
I just punished my way into the band, dude. I just was like, "Hey, you guys want to be friends with me?" And they're like, "Yeah, okay, man, sure."
That's fantastic. Thanks for going over that. I guess like the other question I have as far as like music inspiration and stuff goes, and then we could talk about a few things with how it's been live shows and kind of the scene in that regard for you. But
sure.
Has music, we talked a little bit about it with being a kid in school and kind of making a connection with like these new metal artists, but has music ever really influenced you? I know the band as kind of a backdrop for the band, at least with the last full length celebrity therapist. There's a lot of social and political references in there from
for sure.
Conspiracy theories and like QAnon stuff, definitely, and all this other different these different things that are definitely like very current socially and all that kind of stuff. Is that for you personally as a musician? Has anything kind of influenced you in that way? Bands that were a little more socially conscious, a little more politically active, or anything in that regard that kind of helped shape things that you believe in, or kind of a part of what you?
I'll say that Korn
follow?
definitely didn't help shape my political views. They have one song called "Politics," and it's just bad.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I was also very, very into bands like Rage Against the Machine and System of a Down, and I think those. I wouldn't say like those bands like really pushed off like where I'm at now, but they listening to a lot of interviews with guys like Serge Tankian and Darren, I guess kind of Darren Malakian. He's very tongue in cheek about what he believes, but
Right.
Serge is always very upfront with like how he thought and how like what he believed in, and he was always very, very like I said, like very upfront about it. I guess a lot of those bands like sowed a lot of distrust in are the powers that be for me, and I joining a band like this where that same kind of distrust was I think sowed in somewhat of the same ways. I won't lie and say I'm like a big conspiracy theorist like Carson probably is, and some other people in the band. They would have a lot more like strong opinions and stronger talking points on things like that. Like my favorite one is like the HARP machine thing, like the being able to like the government being able to control the weather. Carson told me about that once. I'm like, that's crazy, and you're probably right. It's funny. My brother is even a bigger conspiracy theorist than I am, bordering on the QAnon stuff. My brother's not a full-on Q guy. Part of my family is, and that was a whole fiasco. But I don't know. I mean, I think with this band, it's very obvious like what we stand for. The groups that we support and the groups that we're a part of. I mean, we're queer. One of us in the band is trans. Like it's no secret that that's the kind of message, the underlying message of like who we are. That I think that's very obvious of what we put forward. And I die for anyone in this band. I die for anyone in that scene. I die for anyone in that like in that community. But I remember like a little while ago, someone was giving a shit for being like that, and they're like, "Oh well, I didn't think that they were queer? Like, what's going on with that? I'm like, you are dumb as fuck. Like, I don't know how you went to a show, saw our show, met us, bought shirts from us, and you just didn't pick up on it. Like, I don't know. I don't like getting
was that on Twitter? Because I think I saw
Yeah,
the
it
exact
was.
response that kind of like went a
Yeah,
little
I'm just
big
like,
in
hey
some
man,
circles, and
don't go to our shows. Like, come on. Like,
yeah.
it's kind of like dumb to be proud of like dunking on a dude with one follower, but like it's one of those things where I think sometimes you just have to like reiterate what the fuck you stand for, especially as like your band starts getting more traction. So you don't, you don't allow people like that into the same spaces as that you're trying to perform in. Like or that you're trying to like have the people that have been following you for years to be in. You don't want that kind of intermingling, and you don't want that shit to get twisted. I'm sure I could talk about this for a very long time, but I don't know, if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing. And
right.
I got like, I wouldn't say I got like scolded, but we usually have a rule of like not engaging in discourse. But it's like, it's like, if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing. And I'd rather just let it be known, like, hey, fuck you. This is who we are.
Well, and like you
Shut
said,
up.
like it's not, especially I guess I would say from like a fan standpoint, but also from bands as well. Like there is this I talked to Garrett from Silent Planet like several months back, and
Cool. Awesome dude.
we talked. Yeah, he's like, he was like the encapsulation of kind of why I wanted to do a podcast like this in some ways, with their music and their message and all that. But he made a good point that I've kind of brought up on this podcast a few times, where there's bands and fans, and especially in metal, where like there's like this integral thing of wanting to try to connect to the most people possible by saying nothing controversial in some way and just speaking in general terms about government maybe, and letting people like throw whatever their ideology is on it. But when you don't make things inclusive for people because you're afraid of losing the fan base of like someone like that like hates when someone just identifies as queer, it's like, what?
Such a good point.
Yeah, like, what are you fucking doing? Like, you're like the like alternative music spaces, just like we talked about in a different way with new metal and stuff like that, for people that really felt disconnected when they were growing up. Like, this music is heavy and passionate and not like conventional mainstream things for a reason, because people have attachment to lyrics, people have attachment to identities, and people want a place to belong. So you're not sitting there like getting in, like you said, getting in discourse because you want to like virtue signal. It's like, no, I want to make sure somebody that's maybe not accepted in like their general community, or maybe like this is the place that they really feel passionate about, or really feel like they found something. Like that's where they go.
I couldn't have said it like better, because like that was kind of like the thought process I was having. It's like, if one person sees this that like was nervous about going to a show, or like thought we stood for something completely different just because it's like heavy and violent music.
Yeah.
No, like we're here, we're queer. Like,
yeah.
You should feel safe to be who you want to be at these shows. I've seen people like of every different fucking like anything, like from the shows that we've had. Like, you are allowed to be whoever the fuck you want to be at these shows, except if you're a piece of shit. Then
right. Yeah, you're not sitting there scolding people if they don't agree with you on something, but like it's one of those things where like people obfuscate like being accepting of people's identities as like a political view, and it's like, I'm sorry, dude, that's not political view. That's just like being a prick. You know what I mean? Like, that's just being a bigot. Like, that's not the same thing whatsoever.
I think that's more like selling out than like having a song on XM radio or in a commercial.
Yeah,
like
100%.
If you just keep your mouth shut when like people like your general fan base that's been there since like EP1 is getting like shit on by like your new fan base or whatever, and you just stay quiet about it and don't do anything, then you're a sellout, because all you care about is like more people, more ass and seats. Like, we all care about that, but at a certain point, at what cost? Because you're always going to have that audience no matter what. But as long as you cater to them. Yeah,
right. Like, what
cater to the right audience. I mean, like the ones that you actually fucking identify with.
Right, and the ones that like your music actually means something to them, and they're not like confused when you talk about something that you think is blaringly obvious of your own band, and then they are like completely turned off by it and like bigoted about it. It's just like, that's not who
Exactly.
you fucking care about. 100%.
Exactly.
That kind of leads into a question I was going to ask just in general of like the live music scene, or what you see as someone in a touring band, especially gaining steam over the last, I would say the last couple of years or so with Callous Daoboys specifically, is like I said, I think the metal community or heavy music in general is a little bit more of like all over the place when it comes to people, like we were just talking about, having various beliefs, or having maybe apolitical beliefs or left-wing beliefs, right-wing beliefs, whatever. Like, I'm not here to talk about politics like that per se, but what I mean is, like, when you've been on tour, or when you see like online discourse when it comes to music from bands or from fans, have you like felt like it's been like a more I guess accepting place that you would, that as we were talking about earlier that you felt growing up, or that influenced you to kind of really connect with this music? Has it felt like some people you see are kind of going a little bit by the wayside with like what am I looking for, with like the kind of messages they put out there, especially bigger metal bands or whatever else, or what's kind of your feeling on the metal music or heavy music scene in general when it comes to inclusivity, I guess, is the question I have for you.
I think it can be very much all over the place, and I think sometimes like the huge bands are like quite literally contracted to not like talk about it at all, and then when they do, there's usually some big fucking blow up, whether it's the quote unquote woke mob going after them, or like their super hard right fan base blowing up at them because they um came out and like there's like, hey, like, if you're trans, that's fine. And then they have an entire half of their fan base that blow up about it. And kind of the same thing on the other side too. But I literally think that some bands are contracted to like keep their fucking mouths shut because either the label or someone on their team knows that they're fucking idiots. But what I also think is funny is like, I think it's very obvious like what side of the spectrum, like, I don't want to talk for him or anything, but I think it's really funny that like it seems like the general fan base of like a band like Lamb of God is probably very far on the right side of things, and like
Right.
I don't think it's any secret what side Randy is on, or Randall is on. I mean, for God's sakes, the dude, like, one of their biggest songs from when they started was Officer Dickhead Gets a Black Fucking Eye. I think it's so it's sometimes like, I don't think he's a guy who's like afraid of speaking his mind or is contracted to not speak his mind, but there's sometimes a very, very interesting divide between what the obvious message on stage is about versus what the audience is.
Mm-hmm.
I remember another really big one was when John Domayan from System of a Down came out as like the biggest Trump supporter ever.
Yeah,
and everyone else in the band, he still is too. Like, that has not changed.
No.
For whatever reason, it has not changed. And the other three guys in the band, like, I don't think they ever said anything about it, but it's got to be one of those things like, there goes John, the talking about dumb shit again, like, for some reason.
I saw I sorry, I don't mean to, but I saw a thing from Surge, because Surge obviously talks about like Armenian rights and human rights and all these different things, and he kind of said something of like, we disagree, but here's a few things we agree on, and he's always a brother and all that kind of stuff. You got to be thinking like off the mic or off the interview, he's like, God, why does he open his fucking mouth?
Like, why did you have to say anything? Like, he's like, well, why did you? You're not the vocalist. What are you doing?
Didn't write the lyrics, right? Yeah, and yet, like, back some of the things Serge has talked about before that are important and are good things to talk about, and it's like your brain seems really confused right now. But that's people, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think the dude's a demon for it, but it's just weird. Like, for 30 some odd years, that band is just vehemently like anti-right, like anti-capitalist, anti-everything that basically Trump has to stand for. And then all of a sudden he's like, I like this guy a lot. Like, okay, John, all right, man. You
Go with
do
it,
that.
man. I guess whatever. Yeah.
All right, John. Cool.
But yeah, I mean, I just think it's because, you know, I think especially for someone that's in some ways is kind of newer in this kind of realm of, you know, your, you know, if you want to call it a, you know, career or whatever, you know, like full-time band in a lot of ways, just to kind of, it's interesting to kind of see the dichotomy of, like you said, bigger bands that are contracted not to say anything, or
I would hope they're contracted not to say anything, because when these guys talk, it's the fucking worst shit you've ever heard someone say ever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to name drop things, but you know, there's especially when it comes to like metalcore or like that kind of scene where some of those bands have blown up to almost like, you know, you see some pictures of them selling out almost like an arena or something like that.
Astronomically huge bands.
And then all of a sudden you see them saying shit about, like, I saw one from the biggest dickhead in fucking metal music that he was like sharing all this stuff about like trying to go after somebody, like go after an organization that like talked down on somebody for like ripping on trans people. And it's like, that's what you use your platform for after all these years of being in an alternative scene of like inclusivity and all that shit. It's like, that's what you want to fucking do.
That's the thing that always gets
me
too, is like metal has, if for a point in time, sure, it was like one of the biggest things on the planet, like when we had hair metal and stuff, but those are also always the ones that surprise me too, is the guys from that era that come out as like transphobic. I'm like, your whole career was based on dressing like a woman, dude.
Yeah,
like,
you were in drag
what's
on
the fucking
stage.
disconnect here? And then you have the same guys that are like saying like, drag queens are trying to corrupt our youth. And I'm like, that was your job in the 80s, dude. What is wrong with you?
Yeah, what the fuck is happening?
What's happening to you people?
The one I was and I'll stop talking about this. Sorry, but like the one I was alluding to was Alice Cooper. The funniest thing I saw, like Alice not funny, Cooper but Alice Cooper, you know, came out about, you know, how people are indoctrinating and this also is important to me. I'm a teacher, and so I hear about these things a lot. And unfortunately it's bullshit. You know, you just want kids to feel accepted and all those kinds of things. But he was saying it specifically about trans kids, and the irony of him like losing a sponsorship of like from a makeup company while he's ripping on like he's ripping on people for just like allowing people say like it, like one of the stories was literally about like a male like wearing makeup and like all these different things, and it's like the irony here is hurting my brain.
From Alice Cooper especially, that's a ridiculous one. But
I know, but I'll stop talking about the void of doom here.
It's fucking old guys. It's always old dudes. I'm telling you, it's always these old dudes in rock that we just should not be listening to anymore. I don't know why Alice Cooper's still in headlines.
Yeah. I don't know why they're not like bringing on why the legacy acts of people that are like older than people's grandparents going to the shows.
My thing is like, why are we surprised? Like,
yeah,
that's another one. Like, we're surprised this old dude thinks this way. Crazy.
Yeah, I guess that's actually the real point as well, right? Oh man, but yeah, I don't know. I just always ask these questions, especially like in the heavy music scene, because I've just been noticing. Again, I think it's what social media pumps up more, because hate sells, like ads.
Hate sells.
Clicks.
It absolutely does.
Yeah. But it's just interesting to go over. So thanks for going over that. One more thing I kind of wanted to ask you, and then I have kind of I guess this is the last question I sort of have for you before we kind of dive into anything else that you might want to talk about with the newest EP. But question I always ask people when they're on this, and I say like half the people hate it, half the people like it, but it seems like everybody like maybe hates it, but I'm going to ask it anyway, is it's kind of like a hypothetical fun question to ask people is, if you are not in Callous Daoboys, or you're the only member remaining and you get to pick anybody else to be in a band with, to write the music that you want to write with, from any bands, living, dead, whatever else, who would you add in as your fantasy league dream band lineup if you could?
Kel from Joy, because I want to get into that dude's brain on how they write stuff. Eric from Loathe.
Such a good pick.
Oh my god. I think they became my new favorite band after playing with them twice in the UK. What's his name? John Otto from Limp Bizkit.
Oh yeah.
Because he takes it to the Matthews fridge all the time. That's just how he does.
Yeah.
Jonathan Davis from Korn. So that's I think one of the most unique metal vocalists like kind of ever
of all time. Yeah.
And I'm gonna pick one more. Beethoven.
What the hell, man? I don't even know what that would sound like, but it sounds fantastic. It'd be great.
Beethoven's in the band now.
Yeah.
He's in the band.
You're the first person that's picked like a classical musician from way back, but I absolutely love it. That's totally like a Callous Daoboys answer as well.
I was trying to think of like a violinist or something. I'm like, Beethoven.
Beethoven and an entire symphony.
Beethoven and his entire symphony. That's what I get with that is Beethoven and his entire symphony.
Yeah.
See, it's a good answer because it's 20 plus musicians.
Yeah, that's absolutely. You got through that faster than anybody else that I've talked to. Just no hesitation. Absolutely love it. So I guess before I let you go, and again, I really appreciate your time, Dan. This has been a really great conversation.
Of course.
Is there anything else that you kind of want to tell the people about the EP? Anything that you are kind of excited about that people might not be expecting? Anything you can tease for the other two songs that you think people should know before it comes out?
When does this come out?
This will come out. Well, it might come out pretty soon, but I can buffer it with some other ones if you want to.
No, you're fine.
Something a little bit. Okay.
Pink Envelope is better than any Fall Out Boy song ever. I don't listen to Fall Out Boy, so I don't know if that's true or not. But it has a really good chorus. And on Designer Shroud of Turin, we sound like In Sync. I'm not going to elaborate on that. We just do. It sounds like In Sync. Carson sounds like JT on it. It's awesome. And we might be debuting one of those songs, one of the other new songs, at a special show around Furnace Fest. It could be Furnace Fest. It could be a different show around Furnace Fest.
I saw you're playing Furnace Fest coming up. You're also going on tour with Protest the Hero, right?
Going on tour with Protest the Hero and Moontooth.
Absolutely incredible. What a band to go on tour with. They're absolutely insane.
Very interesting. You know? I hadn't heard that name in like so many years. And then Carson was like, "Do you want to go on tour with Protest the Hero?" I'm like, I don't not want to go on tour with Protest the Hero. And I didn't realize there was like so much hype behind them with they haven't toured since like 2019 or something like that.
Well, that, and I think they're just another band that really lets it fly with like whatever they're gonna throw in a song and just like kick it into high gear, and you know what I mean. So that'll actually be awesome. Yeah, I'll have to see if I can catch that in October in Chicago. That'll be absolutely fantastic.
You should go. It's gonna be a good time.
It will be a good time. One last question. I know Carson writes. I would assume Carson writes the lyrics for a lot of the songs. But I was interested in the references both with Waco Jesus and the Designer Shroud of Turin, like the song titles, and those are both clear references to like Christianity. For anybody that doesn't know, Shroud of Turin, at least to my knowledge, is talking about the shroud that was put around like Jesus's head when he was
the supposed shroud, the supposed burial shroud that was put on Jesus.
Is this all just kind of thrown as like tongue of cheek song titles, or what? Is there anything you can kind of talk about?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I don't know if I want to give the actual like original source for where Waco Jesus came from. But you know what? Actually, you know what? I will. So there's an interview with Serge Tankian where he talks about the first song when he like met Darren, and like the first song he ever wrote lyrics for. He called it Waco Jesus. So we stole it.
Hell yeah, that's awesome.
I think he actually wrote it about like the Branch Davidians and everything too. I don't think the song like ever saw the light of day or anything like that.
Right.
Designer Shroud of Turin. I want to say I remember not soon after a tour we went on, or during a tour, I was reading this big post about how other like laboratories and whatever research departments have tried to replicate the Shroud of Turin. And I read this like fucking like 5-page dissertation of how every single attempt to replicate it, based on different theories of like how it could be fake, and how all of them failed, because in my opinion, the Shroud of Turin is the real fucking thing. And when you put it under some kind of like imaging, it shows like the face of Christ. And people were trying to replicate it, and they would just keep failing. And they're like, oh, maybe it's the clay from Jerusalem, and they try to do something with that, but none of it would work. I think Carson will say that he came up with the title for it before this, but I think some kind of inspiration struck and was like, Designer Shroud of Turin is the name of the song. And I think that, in my opinion, it was a little too coincidental. I think that's where the name came from, but Carson will have a completely different answer too. Because I brought that up once, and he's like, that's not where I got it from. I'm like, sure, it's not. But yeah, the Waco Jesus, we just stole it, and hopefully Serge sees it and was like, hey, and then takes us on tour.
Pulls you on tour. Yeah.
That'd be really cool if we went on tour with System of a Down. It's a ploy. All of it's a ploy.
Yeah. Well, I hope it all pans out in that regard, because that'd be absolutely
fucking
fantastic.
too. That's my favorite band ever.
Yeah, I mean, God, like there's have you been able to catch them live before?
No,
I got to see them at open air in Chicago a couple of years back, and God, like some people I had heard before I saw them were like, Serge is hit or miss live, like this or that, and I was like, fuck you, this is like one of the best concert experiences.
I mean, even when they're a miss, they're still amazing. Like, look at their fucking performance in Holland from like 2001. It's like the worst performance ever, but it's still awesome. Darren's guitar doesn't work.
Is that the one with all the live stuff? Like, all
the shit. And when like Serge can't get them to start bounce, he's like, start the fucking song, and then he like starts like it catches them off guard. His guitar doesn't work through half of the fucking set. Like it's a perfect show, and it's just fucking riddled with problems through the entire thing. It's like arguably a very bad set, and like allegedly they almost broke up after it. It's one of their biographies or something like that, or autobiographies, where we literally almost broke up after that show because of how bad it was. Like, and
now it's like infamous. Yeah.
Now it's like awesome. Like watching that shit, it's hysterical.
I saw that pop up on like the New Metal Moments Twitter page just the other day, and it reminded me of that. And I was like, holy shit, this is so fucking hilarious.
Hate equipment.
Yeah, just like smacking shit.
I hate anything that is not human.
So good.
It's so awesome for that.
Well, thanks for going over all this, Dan, and doing this so quickly with me after I communicated with you. I really appreciate it. Just kind of plug where people can find you, find the band on socials and all that good stuff. And then one last thing, unless we could obviously play Waco Jesus, but if there's a different Callous Daoboys song you want to play at the end,
no, you should play Waco Jesus.
That's the one. What I figure. But
that's the fucking one. I'd give you the leak for Pink Envelope, but then I'd be breaking.
Then I might get.
I didn't sign a contract. Actually,
no,
I didn't sign a contract. I can do whatever I want. So you can find the band, the Callous Daoboys. If you just search Callous Daoboys anywhere, you will find us. We have a Twitch, we have a Patreon, we have a Instagram, we have a Twitter, we have a Facebook. We might have a LinkedIn. I don't know. We have a YouTube. We have a TikTok. We have a fucking Instagram Threads account because our label told us we needed it. We have everything. Callous Daoboys or the Callous Daoboys. My cat's sneezing. It's awesome.
That's okay.
And then you can find me, Dan Hodsdon, pretty much anywhere. If you search all Dan all day, you will find me. Some of them have an underscore because one guy saw my account once and he's like, all anal day? Is that what that says? I'm like, no. So now I put an underscore in it.
Yeah.
So all Dan all day, professional homunculus. I don't know if the camera picked that up, but
it might have. It'll be fine. It'll work for it. Yeah.
That's us. That's the Callous Daoboys. Right. I'm Dan. I play guitar.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing this. This is fantastic. Like I said, this will be up pretty soon. I'll message you when it comes out and all that, and we'll play Waco. Thanks so much for doing this, Dan. I really appreciate it.
Hell yeah, dude. Thank you.
We're here in the suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia, searching for something sinister. We don't know what it's capable of. We don't know its power. We don't know what it wants. But the locals have called it the Suburban Spectre. We're the Callous Daoboys, and this is Phantom Fight.
Of a man, whether nails in his hands or hunting with his wide whale. He is someone no one to his mother. And if his ecstasy is half his, I believe I'm calling the campaign a job well done. Expectations, or am I simply too high? I keep scrolling down a scrapbook, content with ever after, looking down the back.